So, if you do market with SMS marketing, put in the time to get stuff set up legit, and write out what you can, but also make sure that you have a backup plan in case things go sideways. Just like, we have people that we've worked with that only want to do SMS. And I'm like, you need to be doing mail. You need to be, setting up a brain, you need to be doing other things, because just like with any sort of business, if you are dependent on one process to work and that process no longer works, your entire business is gone. Like, you have to have backups for backups. What's going on, guys? Welcome to today's episode of the Collecting Keys Real Estate Investing Podcast. It is the Mike and Dan Show, and I am your host here, Mike DeHaan, with my co-host here, Dan Austin. And this is the show where we teach you to make massive income, not just passive income, with your real estate investing business, so that you can be rich now and not in like 30 years or whatever when your loans get paid off on your properties. Yeah.
Rich now is nice.
I mean, it's funny. I was talking to some of the guys that work for us here earlier today, and they really are into the investing thing right now. Like, they want to buy properties themselves, which is cool. But like, there's just this huge thing of people just trying to like hyper leverage all the time, which makes a lot of sense. But if you don't have like a strong vertical income and all you're doing is max leveraging all these properties forever, you honestly would be better off just having like a W-2 job, because then you'll be able to pay your bills and you'll still probably be doing pretty well when you're 65, versus just like hoping that no shit breaks in your properties for the entire lifespan, which they ultimately will do by the time they get paid down.
Yeah. Cash is king, right? No matter who you are, what you're doing. And real estate investing, the joke is you always feel poor, but it's because all your money and all your net worth is locked up in the equity of your properties that you hope is there. And there's like this argument I actually heard on another podcast with some guys that I really respect, and that this was a conversation they're having, like who cares about net worth? Like, liquidity is massively important, and being able to like have cash now to make investments, but also to like eat, which was one of the things that you got to be able to eat.
I think it's funny because that's changed a lot, I feel like, over the last little bit, because if you look at a lot of OG landlords, they didn't care about their immediate money at all. All they cared about was their assets. And I wonder what that shift has been, if that's like generational, if that's just like a sign of the times, just because we do live in a more expensive society.
I think there's that's a big piece, like expensiveness of everything. And we're in an inflationary period too, so it feels even worse. But like we're going through like this handoff of generations, right? The boomers are retiring, and they have been. They're retiring from W-2 world. They're retiring from landlording. And I do feel like this is a cycle you can get caught in, right? So, and we're going to see probably a lot of this with the younger generation investing, because there's a bunch of new landlords out there. They bought these properties, they fixed them up, they bird them, they followed the process, and it worked out fantastic. But then it comes around to where 5, 7, 9 years later, you kind of have to repair that same shit that you just installed, or it feels like you just installed. Like, we talk to sellers all the time, like, oh, I just updated the kitchen. Yeah, 20 years ago. But like, they're not going to want to do that. And so they're going to choose not to. And then cash flow, because they were told cash flow is like the best thing, and they're retired on their cash flow, living in their van down by the river. And they can't give up $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 to like rebuild this property, or add new flooring, add new kitchen, and then refinance again, because maybe the rate environment doesn't work, or they recognize, damn it, that's going to screw up my cash flow. So they just do nothing, and then they turn it into slumlords that we buy properties.
Can't keep up with the maintenance, which is such a huge thing.
Exactly. It's a balance. It's really hard. And like, I love cash flow, I love passive income, but you have to recognize the reality of what that means.
That's why we focus on the show on how to make real money, through doing things like wholesaling or flipping, or, providing services, like whether you're a general contractor or those sort of things. Those are all real estate specific things that you can do within this same business that also support your investing. And just focusing on those things instead of always just the investing yourself is how you can, live a lifestyle while also being able to buy. Like, for example, I just got back from my second international trip for the year. I was in Japan for the last 2.5 weeks. If you guys have listened at all over the past couple of weeks, you've probably heard some pre-recorded shows that we recorded a while back. It's because I've been out for most of the month of November. Just traveling around Japan for 2.5 weeks with my wife. It's a cool country though, man. Like, tell you what, I've traveled a lot of places. That's like the one place that I've been that like I will absolutely go back to. Like, it's not like, oh, it would be good to go back there someday, but like
Yeah.
I would go back there on like a very regular basis just because I really liked the vibe of it.
Yeah. What it seems like to me is it's like a
Dude,
densely packed island, right? Like there's just so much to do, so much to
there
see
is,
in
but
such
it's
a small
also
area.
like it's easy to get around because of the train system, and they have the Shinkansen, which is like the
Yeah.
bullet train that you can take between the major cities, and it takes like a couple of hours. Like we took from on the last day when
That's
we were flying
awesome.
home, we went from Osaka to Tokyo on the bullet train, and it took us like it was like 2 hours and 10 minutes. But like
What does
eighty
it cost you to get
bucks,
on that train
it's not bad. Yeah, dude, that's
for a
legit.
2 hour? Like that's
But the
legit, dude.
distance,
Like
it
that's
was like
nice.
500 miles, right? So like if you were to drive that, it'd take you 6.5 hours. But you can just go get on the train. You can just like
Yeah,
zone
that's
out. We got to
crazy.
the train station like 10 minutes before our train left. Just got on, had some food, went for
Nice.
2 hours, then got off, and you're just like, oh, that was awesome, you know. But yeah, it's like very
That is
affordable to get
cool.
around, like tons and tons to do. I really enjoyed like Japanese people and like their respectfulness. Like, even though we were surrounded by tons and tons of people all the
Hmm.
time, both my wife and I are intrinsically introverted. It didn't feel exhausting just because everyone is like very respectful of personal space.
Mm,
And they're very sort of like mindful
right.
about like, how to not be a dickhead in crowded areas because they're used to it all the time. I mean, even like
Well, what about the other tourists though? Like you do run into that usually. Is that just a different vibe
dude,
there too, or just less of that?
honestly, shockingly, in Kyoto, we saw a lot of tourists. It's like the touristy area. It's funny, a lot of people they love Kyoto. I
Hmm.
actually was not a
Yeah.
fan because it felt like the area that they had manufactured for my benefit as a tourist. But I really enjoyed
Right. Yeah.
Tokyo and Osaka and
Yeah.
Hiroshima because I felt like all of those places they were just kind of doing their thing and you were a guest in their country. And so as a result, A, we didn't see a lot
Yeah.
of tourists, and B, just because the tourists are such an extreme
Nice.
minority, everyone is immediately peer pressured into just like doing what everyone else is
Hmm.
doing. You know, for
Doing
sure,
yeah,
right?
doing the
And
right
also too, I
thing.
think the kind of people that go to Japan aren't the kind of people that are going to be like ignorant tourists that are like, I'm doing my once in a lifetime trip to
Yeah.
Italy where I'm just going to be obnoxious the whole time. But so
Right.
so they sort of
Totally.
conform
Totally.
to it. Um, but I mean, all people were very, very welcoming. It was extremely cheap to like buy food and like do everything else there. It's crazy. They have an open container
Hmm.
rule like all throughout the country. Do you know this? You can just like go into a convenience store and like buy like a whiskey highball and just like walk around the streets of Japan whenever you want and no one cares. It is.
Dude, it's like Las Vegas, but I'm assuming it's like less
Well, if you get like
debauchery
kind
and
of
less
later into the
idiots.
night, like there's definitely some debaucherous behavior, but like they don't care. Like you can
Sure.
just go
Yeah.
and grab a drink and walk around and drink
Yeah.
it. But it's a town with a town. It's the biggest city in the world. 36 million people in
Right.
Tokyo, right?
Wild. Wild. I remember my dad because my parents lived there in the 80s, and he used to always tell me how cool it was. You could literally go and buy anything out of a vending machine, like anything, including beer.
Yeah.
And this is back in the 80s, so
Well, you
the
can't buy
rules
anything
still
out of vending
stand
machines. It's
apparently.
funny. Like several people made jokes about that. Like when we were there, I pretty much the only thing you see out of
Hmm.
vending machines is like drinks, like water, coffee. But they have hot and cold
Yeah.
vending machines. You can get a hot coffee out of a vending machine, which is pretty rad.
Yep.
Um, no, you don't
You get
get food.
sushi?
Like so, you would very very rarely see
No
like
food. Okay.
snack vending machines. But it would only be kind of in like touristy
Right.
areas. You wouldn't see it just sort of like spread throughout the cities. But you
Oh,
see
okay.
drinks everywhere. So in Tokyo, they were saying that
Right.
there is one vending machine for every 3 million people. No, sorry, for every 13 people in Tokyo. So basically, there's like 3 million vending machines just in Tokyo. But they're all
Wow.
over the place, and
Wow.
everything's like 50 cents. You can get your water and get your coffee, whatever. Um, but not. It was
Right.
cool though. Like
That's
anybody
a good
has the
deal.
opportunity to go there, I'd highly recommend that you do. Um, you know, plan to have a learning curve with like how to interact with people, how to get around, because nobody speaks English. Even in the
Yeah.
hotels or like sort of like
Hmm.
the larger, more touristy areas, you would be lucky to find someone that spoke English. Um, but
Jeez.
right.
Sounds like American hotels.
For real though. But I was like, this is exactly how it feels for everyone else to come to the United States when no one speaks whatever their language is.
To the US, yeah, exactly. And we
Yeah,
just
yeah.
assume you better speak English. like wherever
Yeah,
you
I think
go,
the
but it's
difference
not
is
true their
that
brand.
they were very accommodating and they were professionals at just like communicating just with
Mm,
gestures. Or like some places they would even have like a little sign
right.
where they could like point at like phrases that they would need to ask you and they could just like point to it and then you
Mm,
can like nod your head or whatever so they you can communicate that way.
got it. What about
We
Google
used it a
Translate?
little
Did that work
bit,
out well?
but honestly a lot of the stuff was too fast paced that it was kind of
Yeah.
cumbersome to do it. So, you know,
Got
yeah,
it. Yeah.
but
That is
either
kind
way,
of a pain in the
super
ass.
super good spot, super fun country, and I recommend anyone that likes travel should go.
What about like investment in like real estate? I mean, you and I were talking like obviously the dollar against everything's super strong, but super strong
Yeah,
against the Japanese yen right now. Like
yeah. So
can
I
we
did a
buy some
little
stuff
reel
over there?
about that on my Instagram at Mike_invests. And just like looking into how real estate works there, it's very interesting because they're extremely open to outside investment. So the real estate market
Mm-hmm.
crashed in Japan in like the late '80s, early '90s, and it kind of never really recovered. Right, so they had this huge bubble that went up, and then it crashed, and then it just has kind of like stayed stagnant since then, and they've had like a little bit of inflation, but not a lot. So as a result, they've had properties that have kind of stayed the same or have dropped in value, particularly because their population is declining. So they're like their demand is like slowly
Mm-hmm.
dropping, and so they have a lot of I would say like openness to outside investors that want to come in and buy stuff. You can get like a traditional, Japanese local loan from most banks, from what I understand. And their interest rates are super good because they don't have massive inflation like a lot of other parts of the world do. So you can get loans there right now between 3 and 4%
Yeah.
on like long term fixed loans. And they like
Mm-hmm.
the only thing that yeah
They
you
do
have
like
to
really long
live in.
loans there too. I think they
Yeah,
underwrite
you can
like
get 100-year
50,
loans, but you
like
have to live in the
generational loans.
property in order to do those. As you're like an investor, you have to get just like more traditional, like yeah, 35
Oh,
year
like an
AM
investor
seems to be
loan.
the
Yeah.
common one. But a lot of stuff I was reading was saying that the biggest hurdle is just that the way they do business, like the customs and everything, are very different. So you realistically need someone that is a
Mm-hmm.
Japanese local to be able to like have those conversations for you or work on your behalf, just because like kind of like how
Yeah.
when you're working with a loan officer here, if you do kind of like weird stuff, you set enough red flag, you'll probably do it there without really realizing it. But I think if you could find
Yeah.
properties, like
Yeah.
there's probably some great yield because people there tend to have money. It's a
Yeah.
very respectful culture. The chances of getting like bad tenants who are going to do weird stuff is going
They'll
to be
trash your
generally
house.
low. Um, and also landlord law in
Right.
general is very landlord friendly across the country. Um,
Mm. Would be interesting to see that then, like the returns, because I know historically, like Japan has been. They always say like, oh, they've been in a recession, right? They're a recessionary environment for like decades now, which would speak to the
mhm.
fact that you're saying they've got low interest rates, but also that they basically aren't going to see a lot of appreciation in your
Yeah.
assets. So maybe it's more of a cash flow play. Like what that would look like, which like you're saying, it might be better cash flow because they're not going to trash your units. You don't have to price in so much maintenance like you do for a lot of the US properties that we own. You just always have to worry about somebody letting their dogs shit all over your house while they live in it, which is just mind blowing to me when you compare that to like a Japanese culture where they
Yeah,
don't even
right.
let you
And they're
have
very, very
shoes on
strict
in their
about that as
house,
well.
know?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different parts to it, but I think there could be an opportunity for sure for the right person. I think that the biggest barrier for anyone
For
from the
sure.
states would be
Right.
finding that local person that's going to want to work with you. Um, because like even though they are very
Yeah. Yeah.
welcoming, they're definitely like I would say like protective of their culture, which makes sense. Um, but I mean, it's
Mm.
kind of what their
Yeah,
roots
of
are.
course.
Like a lot of people don't know this about Japan, but like
Hmm.
they went from being like a feudal system where like the samurai ruled everything and it was, like they were using swords and were very primitive to having airplanes within like a 40-year span, right? It's just exponential growth.
It's wild.
And that's one of the reasons that like World War II and stuff
Hmm.
happened as well. I guess like all their conflicts they did throughout Asia is because they had the feudal leaders that were all of a sudden given modern weaponry. And they're like, why would we not go and fuck up China?
They're like, hell
Right?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, we're the
Yeah,
best.
exactly.
Let's
Right.
go fight these people.
But that's also one of the reasons that after they lost World War II, they shifted incredibly quickly because all the sensible people were like, oh, we don't need that shit anymore. We want to be like you guys. And so there's a lot of different quotes from
Yeah.
a lot of people that were part of like the the renovation of Japan after the war, that were like, I've never heard of a country that was just like so willing to change and just like upgrade everything. And that's why.
That's good. And the U.S. was also like, by the way, we're taking away all your guns. You're not allowed
Yeah,
to have a
right.
military anymore.
Yeah.
So they're
I
like,
know
okay,
they did
fair
it
enough.
everywhere. But they also just like, axe all the people that were leading that conflict. But
Right. Right. Yeah, it is incredible because like what it is now for when you compare it to other countries post World War II, like how much Japan shifted in like they're like a technology leader, leader in business industry. I mean, just even like a simple example like Toyota, like how like dominant Toyota is. Like they basically have created and
yeah.
changed the entire automobile industry based off of one company's way that they process their like improvements within the manufacturing system, which is basically what came out of like
Yeah.
lean
Yeah.
manufacturing.
I
Is like
mean, and there's
Toyota.
lots of stuff like that, right? And kind of the thing with Japan when
Mm-hmm.
you're going around everywhere you go, you're like, that just makes freaking sense that it does that. Like why doesn't everything do that? Even
Right.
just like little stuff,
Yeah.
like in all the
Yeah.
bathrooms, and everyone knows about like the Japanese like smart toilets, right? Where everything has like a bidet and like the heated seats and all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But like just in all like the men's stalls, for example, they had like a little area where you could like set your child if you like had a baby with you, that was like a little seat that was in there. So you could like do your business while also dealing with your
Super
baby. I was like,
clutch.
why does everywhere not have that? Well, here they would just get busted off the wall all the time, right? Um,
Yeah. And they like climb underneath the stalls and they put their hands on
yeah,
dirty
and
shit
because they
because
don't have
little
anywhere
kids
to
don't have
sit, right? They don't
boundaries.
like give somewhere to put them, so you have to kind of like deal with that. So it's
Exactly.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah. You
Yeah,
got to
yeah.
hang
Or
them up by the
like the
coat hanger.
craziest thing, dude, like the trains, when you're at the end of the line and the train needs to turn direction, it's going to go the other way now. They're like, well, people don't want to sit backwards in the train. They want to sit facing the direction they're going. So literally you can see it in the window. All the seats in the train, they flip 180 degrees just automatically. Dude, insane.
That's
Yeah.
wild. That's wild, actually.
Just little stuff
That's
like
wild.
that. It just always like
That's pretty
makes
cool.
sense. And we're like, why is it not like that everywhere? I have no idea.
Mm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
either way,
Yeah.
I
We're all
always
not that
heard
smart.
before we went that it's a great country to go to and realize how shitty your own country is with a lot of stuff. And that is absolutely true. Like,
Yeah. You've got some ahas now. You should come back and bring some of that technology
the
back here, dude.
problem is,
Some of
in
those
order
concepts
for it
and
to
ideas.
function, you need mass adoption. And the reason they have mass adoption is because they are an extremely undiverse society.
Right. Yeah. There's
Yeah,
a
it's
lot
like
of
almost
Japanese
all
people that live in
Japanese people,
Japan.
right? And they're all raised Japanese. Like we don't
Yeah.
have all these different like melting pot
Right.
cultures that are sort of trying to cohesively live
Yeah.
together. Be either you're Japanese or you're a foreigner. And if you're a foreigner, they're like, cool, you got to do it our way or else we'll just not have anything to do with you.
Yeah, that is one of the I guess pros about being like the countries that are like that. There's like less diversity is that they have these really strong cultural backgrounds that drive everything. But then when they want to shift or change or adopt, well, we're all kind of the same. They're all moving. I'm not saying that's the best way to go, but it definitely makes it easier. Like when you see them
Yeah,
be able to shift
exactly.
after World War II, like you're
Yeah. I
talking
mean,
about,
they
right?
didn't even have
It's
trash
pretty
cans
incredible.
anywhere. Like in the whole, any freaking city, because all
That's
the people
smart.
there are trained from a young age to just take their trash home with them. So like you like,
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to worry about telling our kids not to do drugs, let
right?
alone
We
freaking
can't
pick
go
up their
anywhere here
garbage.
without seeing trash.
Dude, it's so funny you say that. So you and I were talking about that when you got back, and like literally, so we pulled up. Was it yesterday? I think it was. It was yesterday, Sunday. We went out, blah blah blah, just driving around as a family, pull into a parking lot, and I literally open up my door and I see like somebody took their entire Five Guys burgers, like order, like not the food or
Nice.
the garbage, just left it there. They just opened their door and kicked it out. I'm like, first of all, you drove here and either ate it in the parking lot and then dumped it, or you just had it in your car. And like, I think it's a good spot to dump it. I'm like, and we have public trash cans for people to pick up. So it just is a funny moment to have a coincidence
Yeah,
in
I
that
mean
time. I was like,
that
this
is
is
the
stupid.
stark comparison right there. Whereas like
People suck.
walk around Tokyo, you didn't see any trash. The only trash that you saw was in like when it was gathered up in bags by like the night workers whose job was just to go around and pick up trash. Right. Yeah, it's crazy. So, anyways, I recommend
good
people
deal.
go there if you have any interest in travel at all. It's a great destination. Very, very cheap right now with the yen. Surprisingly easy to get to. I mean, for us from the West Coast, from Seattle, the flight there was like 9 hours. The flight back was like 7 hours and
Super
15
easy.
minutes. It's like honestly not that much longer than going to Hawaii. And it was significantly cheaper.
And the funny thing is the cost like to go to Hawaii is like kind of
Oh yeah.
incredibly high for like
Oh
what
yeah.
you're doing, for like the travel wise. So you can go like even further, go to Japan, a whole nother country probably for. I'm gonna guess, I haven't looked at the tickets, probably like
Probably,
a
especially the
third
time of
less
year,
of the
depending when you're
cost.
going.
You know, like first class to Hawaii versus first class to Japan
Yeah.
is pretty
Yeah.
massively probably different.
Yeah.
I should have
So,
to look that up on Google
anyways,
Flights.
cool. Well, I appreciate you holding down the business while I was gone. How'd everything go? It didn't completely collapse.
Well. No, it went well. The team did really well. Of course, just things continue to operate. This is the interesting thing about where we're at in business is things will continue to operate without either of you not like showing up. Like me or you could not show up for a week, and we're still gonna have closings, which is super cool. Which properties will still close, properties will still get under contract, and when we had guys getting things under contract just consistently, the difference is just to continue to improve and optimize things to make them better because we don't have like a deep like middle management structure at our company. There's just opportunity for mistakes to happen or things to just kind of like get lulled
Mm-hmm.
into not well if somebody's not continuously oversight, because we're partially middle management as well as like the senior leaders in our company. So there's that piece where I could see the next level up from where we're at is going to be pretty awesome to always have that continuous improvement without us having to push it. But other than that, yeah, I think all the team, that everybody
Yeah.
knows what their marching orders are, right? And so they continue to march forward, continue to get stuff done. And we're anything where even though we're holding the ball, but we need things to move forward, it's still getting moved forward, outside of like operations of the business, like the sales and marketing, like that stuff just kind of goes. But we also have all these other strategic things we're trying to implement, and those things just continue to march forward. So
Yeah.
that's been
I think
really
one of
cool
the
to observe.
challenges with not having middle management, so like there's kind of like the phase of business, right? There's, you're basically the person that needs to be working there all the time in order to make money. There's kind of the phase where we're like, we need to be providing oversight to make
Mm-hmm.
money. And then there's kind of like the larger corporation where you can have that middle management that allows you to step away a little bit, which we have in some parts of the business. But when you're in that
Right.
middle phase where you still kind of need to drive the ship, it's like, remember that term that we learned in physics class in college of entropy, right? Where everything is constantly moving towards a
Oh
state of
yeah.
disorder. That's just kind of like how it feels when
Yep.
you're not involved in the business, right? Where
Totally.
everyone knows what's happening. There's activity, there's energy that is going around, but it is just slowly getting messier and
Mm-hmm.
messier and messier and messier until you come back and you just kind of like
Yeah.
shove it all together again, you know?
One of the most incredible things about business that continues to ring true that's along the same line is how much like inefficiencies can happen due
All the
to
time.
misunderstandings of communication. And due to communication, like if you're doing email or Slack messaging versus just doing a meeting, or doing a meeting and somebody walking away with a different point of view than you meant, and then all this work gets done, and then it just takes somebody to step in, whoever that is, and say, "No, that is not what we're trying to do. Like, let's just eliminate all of this work that we're focusing on and just march forward, skip a few steps." And so that inefficiency, no matter what, just seems to be like in the business. And it's like, how do you continue to pull that out so people really
Yeah, well,
understand the
it's
vision
like
and how to get there?
all the challenges happen when you're passing things from one person to the other, right? Just communication isn't working, especially when it's a virtual
Totally.
business, even
All the
harder.
failures.
So like we just launched our
Mm-hmm.
free subject 2 course, which you should go to collectingkeys.com/sub2 and you can pick that up for free. We'll teach you all of what Pays More we teaches for 10K. You can get it for free and it won't cost you anything. But we've been working on just like getting some of like the follow-up campaigns, things for that, to make sure that people are actually opening it, and the people that have like gotten actually know where to get the link and all those sort
Right.
of things. Newer company, newer online business, trying to figure that out. And talking with our team this morning, it just sounded like we have too many cooks in the kitchen, and everyone's kind of expecting someone else to do
Yeah.
one part of it, but no one's like bringing it all together, right? And that's just
Yep. You got to have that one single person with a single
exactly.
view, right? Step,
And
step, step,
that
step.
happens in every business at some level. And I mean, even at larger businesses too, that still happens. Yeah, I would say it's a lot worse at larger
at larger
businesses, and
businesses.
it's made even worse by the fact that you have the one guy who, just is like the go-getter who just does all of it, and you now have 9 people on the team who don't do anything,
Yep.
right? Yeah.
Which is most companies, right? Like most big companies. Small companies, we can't afford to do that. And you really do have to like get rid of this idea of like, that's not my job, because you hear that a lot in the government. You hear that a lot of large corporations and some small companies too. Like, well, that's not my job. I don't worry about that. I just do what I'm worried about, like what I'm paid to do. when you're in a small business like this, like you have to have everybody marching towards the same thing and being willing to pick up the ball if it gets dropped, and seeing a ball getting dropped and picking it up, as opposed to kind of turning a blind eye, or like you just said, assuming somebody else is going to do that, because that tends to mean that me or you are doing it, right? If there's an assumption that we're doing it. So it's like, how do we continue to shape that and all of our employees to understand that they know the exact processes of what we're going.
Yeah, it's a lot of communication, a lot of documentation, a lot of making sure that people read the documentation. And then the big thing as well is refining that documentation, which is something that I think a lot of people don't understand, and that we spent some good time talking about at KeysCon as well. Is once you have your SOPs, once you have things documented, you're not done. You now started, and now that's a living document to be changing forever.
Yeah. Always has to be getting updated, and that's the easiest thing to fall off. Like you and I have done this in the past, where like we'll create stuff and then it'll just never actually get updated, and so nobody actually looks at it, because then they have to just go to the person that knows the knowledge, which is, you know, usually me or you. And so it's like, how do you actually commit to that? It's just like, you have to do that. You have to have a cycle. We hired a guy to help us do it. That's one of the ways we do it, because we know our personalities.
Probably one of the biggest things about being a business owner that most people hate, and why I think most people don't scale their businesses. But that's also what being an entrepreneur is, right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Being innovative and making things happen, and getting everybody marching in the same direction, and understanding the vision and painting that picture is like, and getting them motivated behind it. That's a lot of it.
So here we are, beginning of December. What does the end of the year look like? I know we are always really big on pushing the marketing and sales as much as we can. I guess like for us, for closings, we have quite a few closings to wrap out the year, which I'm pretty excited about. Which will be good. The biggest challenges that we're facing next year, which I'm sure some of you will be facing as well, SMS marketing as it has existed for years is kind of on the brink of going extinct right now. Just with all of the new regulations that have come through. I had a big meeting with our SMS team this morning, and like they were walking through all the stuff that we need to do, and it just feels so patchworky right now.
Sticky, and
it doesn't. And that was actually a big point of our conversation. And I was like, okay, so we have a patch for right now that we can get going. But what happens when in 3 months from now, when this is no longer feasible to do? What's our next plan? So we're starting to piece some of those things together. In the meantime, for some of our partners, we're going to have you guys be going through and getting your own 10 DLC registrations, everything all set up so that we can still, work with you in your markets appropriately. Because right now the SMS is just not effective. And it's one of those things that it's a major pain to deal with. I also think it creates a huge opportunity for people who are willing to do it correctly, because now it has a higher barrier to entry to be able to market that way. So, if you do market with SMS marketing, put in the time to get stuff set up legit, and write out what you can, but also make sure that you have a backup plan in case things go sideways. Just like, we have people that we've worked with that only want to do SMS. And I'm like, you need to be doing mail. You need to be, setting up a brand, you need to be doing other things, because just like with any sort of business, if you are dependent on one process to work and that process no longer works, your entire business is gone. Like, you have to have backups for backups.
Totally. Yeah, you got to have multiple channels in anything you're doing, right? Backups to backups. And like, just to think about this, this is a marketing intensive business. And so this should be like, that should be your primary thing. Like, people, I think, maybe take it for granted that they just assume lead flow is always going to be good. And you and I have seen it, it ebbs and flows. Like, cold calling used to be a pretty popular thing. But then it really fell off, like people's like success rate with that. And if you think about it, like in real estate, why that's happening is like, people are like, first of all, the phone companies are getting better at filtering stuff. And like, people are just getting like numbed by that. They just assume if it's not a number in their phone that they're just not going to answer. Right. So it's a hard system. Right. And maybe cold calling will come back as texting falls off. I don't know. But if you were just a cold calling person, a lot of those people really fell off in the real estate game because that's all they knew. And then they couldn't spin up direct mail, or they didn't understand how to do that. They didn't spin up texting. They just kind of fell off. But like, if you think about, like, what are you going to do? Like, just talking about even the holidays, like people shut down their business. If you think about that, that's 1/12 of your marketing like ability, 1/12 of your lead flow, 1/12 of your business. Are you just now operating on 10 or 12, 11 or 12ths of your business, 10 or 12, 11 months out of the year? That's pretty dumb. If you think about it. No other company, Coca-Cola, is not doing that. They're a marketing business. Like, that's their whole shtick, right? That they sell soda pop, but they're really a marketing agency for that. So it's like, think about that when you're looking at your different marketing channels. If one shuts off, what does that do to your business? If you're only doing
Yeah,
one, it's going to
exactly. I mean, it's
decimate your
just like,
business.
having different exit strategies. If you only know how to wholesale and the market no longer
Mm-hmm.
favors wholesaling, or your state outlaws wholesaling, how are you going to make money? You don't know how to do a double close. You don't know how to flip properties. You don't know how to do
Mm-hmm.
novation. You don't know how to buy subject to. You don't know how to do lease
Yep.
options. You need to have a basic understanding of all of them. Even if you have one you prefer, that's fine. But you need to have enough of a basic understanding of what your options are so that you
Mm-hmm.
can pivot if needed. Right. And when it comes to the marketing, like a great way
Absolutely.
to sort of like analyze it is to look at what the people that are sort of like promoting different education, different coaching, or like part of their brand with different marketing endeavors, and seeing how they're changing. Right. So, the cold calling, this made me think of
Mm-hmm.
this immediately. Colbert Johnson, who's he's coming on the show here, I think in a couple weeks. I don't think his episode's come out yet. But his whole thing has been cold calling forever. Like that was his thing. He has a call center. His social
Mm-hmm.
media recently has shifted from
Mm-hmm.
this is how you cold call to find deals to this is how you build a cold calling center for whatever your business is. That tells you something, right? The original
Mm-hmm.
play is no longer as effective as it was. And he's expanding his audience. Same if you go and you look at people that have been
Absolutely.
strictly around like like wholesaling or seller financing, right, or whatever it is. Let's just say with wholesaling, and we fall into this as well. We're starting to get more into making sure that people understand seller financing, they understand subject to, they understand the different pieces of it, because we recognize that if people are coming in expecting to just be wholesalers, they will not be successful, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things that this is a good conversation because you see a lot of people out on the internet. They're talking about their one niche that they're experts at, that they teach. Like this is the way to being a millionaire. This is the way to freedom. Whether that's talking about only doing this type of marketing, or only doing subject to or seller finance or land deals. Really, what we talk about, what we found success in, is like being a holistic investor. You can't just show up and do one thing. Some people have tagged us as like, oh, you guys are the direct mail marketing guys. We're like, no, that's just one of our lead sources that we always do because it
Mm-hmm.
consistently produces. Like there's nothing stopping you from being able to mail people. There's no technology in between that. It's like you mail people, they call back in.
Yeah.
It's like as old as time, right? It's been like Sears and Roebuck catalogs. Like this stuff works, right? We do other lead sources. We do other like lead gen, but we also do other things other than wholesaling. We do flipping. We teach people on how to buy and hold and stabilize their properties. We teach people how to scale their businesses outside of just being a wholesaler that can do one thing, because in reality, for longevity in this business, you have to be able to adapt and do multiple things and pull levers and be good at
Yeah,
pulling levers when
exactly.
those
Yeah.
levers are working.
And, going back to just making sure you're able to pivot as well, even across different asset classes too, right? You look back at the original guy of like just have
Mm-hmm.
one
Yeah.
expertise was Brandon Turner. And he started with mobile home parks. And then he realized that he
Mm-hmm.
screwed up because everyone was going after mobile home parks. And all of a sudden he was doing multifamily, right? He was doing that for a while. You know what he's doing
Yeah.
now? Self
Yeah.
storage, right? That's what he's
I
pivoted
was
to
just about
now.
to say
Part
the
of it
self
is because of
storage.
his
Yeah.
opportunities. A big part of it as well is because he is recognizing that those asset classes that he became experts in are no longer going to be viable for him in the future. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or there's not enough quantity to do enough lead flow for people, right? And the same, I mean, fortunately, like single family, small residential is always in abundance because it's the
Yep.
highest like number of assets. But that to be said, you do need to have the ability to pivot your asset classes, and not that you shouldn't become an expert in anything, but be able to pivot and adapt as the market allows that. Because like right now, everybody's talking about like, what do you do? We're in a stalemate on these negotiations with sellers and buyers and all that sort of stuff. Well, there's definitely other opportunity in your market. You just have to know where to look for it. It might not be an off
Yeah.
market
I think
traditional
all this to
wholesale
say
deal.
that this is why it's valuable to always be learning and be like a true real estate professional, right? And like understand how real estate works as a whole so that you
Yes.
can figure out, the entire sort of sphere of opportunity that you have. Because if you
Mm-hmm.
come in, I would say that when you're starting out, absolutely be a one trick pony. Get good at one thing, make your first round of money,
Yes.
make it, have a couple $100,000 in the bank so you can go and start to
Yes.
apply it towards other things. You can do that while even like picking something that is not optimized for the current market, right? You can go and you can BS your way to make some money.
Mm-hmm.
When you're trying to grow a business, you're trying to make like, seven figures, multi seven figures. That's when you need to start to expand your mind to the different opportunities that you have, whether that's through marketing, whether that's through your investments, whether that's through your different opportunities or your ways that you're going to make money, like vertically, right? So you can make more, bring more revenue coming in. if you try to grow something like that to massive scale when it isn't fully aligned with what's available in the market, that's where you're going to get stuck. So you need to be willing to pivot. And also you need to understand that as we go forward into the future, things will continue to happen faster and faster. So you need to be willing to pivot more and more all the time.
Yeah, and I'll just drive this point home with kind of the concept and the idea about people that want to sit on the sidelines when their one trick doesn't work. Real estate's all about being in the game of a long period of time, and if you want to truly have a business where you're making massive income, not just passive income, like you need to be able to adapt and shift. Because like early, I would say mid, late last year, I've talked to several people like, well, I'm just sitting on the sidelines until interest rates come down. And it's like, that's fine. That's okay. But like, you're missing out on so much opportunity between now and whenever the hell that happens. Because in business, we can't just like guess and hope for things to happen, because that's not how you actually run.
And that's also assuming that they ever will come down. It could be 30 years.
Exactly. I don't know.
Right. And the perfect example you mentioned before about how Japan's been a recessionary economy for like 40 years. It's been about since the early 90s, right? Imagine all those people that were real estate investors during the boom that they had in the 80s into the 90s that were like, oh, well, I guess I'm just going to wait for the economy to come back. Well, it's literally been a bunch of generations now, and 35 years almost since that happened, 32 years. So always like, try to project as much as you can, but understand that there's so many things that are out of your control. And the best thing you can do is learn how to make money right now and not wait for the world to kind of be able to service whatever your goals are.
Yep. The world's not going to adapt around your business model.
Cool. Anything else you want to add in?
No, man. It's a good conversation. Good to have you back in the same country.
I'm happy to be
same
back.
Continent.
I will say going to Asia is definitely much harder to work remotely than doing stuff in Europe. Well, the time's weird because you're backwards. Right? Because like in Europe, when I was there in August, like in like the early afternoon, it was like morning here, so you can kind of be involved. But there, because I was 7 hours back, basically I always missed the morning. I was only ever available at the end of the day here when everyone's fucking off anyway, because it's the end of the day. Right. So it was never very productive. Right. So it's just, if you're going to try and run a remote business, Asia's hard. If you're in the United States, Europe is much, much easier. You can get by pretty well over there. So cool. Anyways, guys, thanks so much for listening. If you want to check out our free subject to course, what's even in that, Dan? You teach people like, because you put it together.
Yeah. So so essentially it's one of the courses we did for our instant investor group. We kind of adapted it, and it's honestly, if I could like tagline it, it's like teaching you how to do subject to the right way, and really dispels a lot of the myths the gurus talk about. And we just really break it down. And then at the end, there's like literally an example of like how we've done subject to and what the process should look like. Because ultimately what I don't like about half the people out there teaching anything in real estate is they never take into account taking care of the seller on the back end after the deal is done, and they don't ever take into account underwriting and making sure that the buyer is going to be the right person for that seller. So we talk about a lot of the protections you need to put in there just to protect everybody in the transaction. So it's really a quick one. I think it's 30-45 minutes, and it really is just like down and dirty, dispelling the myths and getting after what you really need to know.
Perfect. So if you have questions about how exactly put together transactions, how to deal with some of the risks associated, like the due on sale clause, the insurance situation, the property tax situation, if you're saying I didn't even realize those were problems, you definitely need to check this out, because these are the things that certain people online are not telling you are the risks associated with it. You should go to collectingkeys.com/sub2. You can spell sub2 however you want. They'll always put you the same place. You can use the number. You can do TO, whatever. And you should grab that free course for you there, and that'll get you started. But besides that, guys, we appreciate you all, and we'll talk to you guys next week.